I've dreaded making this video, but also look forward to it at the same time. I've made lots of NASCAR videos on this channel, but never addressed who my favorite driver that I pledged my allegiance to from start to finish. Well, I feel like it's time. The kid from Enumclaw, Washington, who exploded onto the scene as a young phenom at the age of 24, Kasey Kahne. This isn't going to be some autobiography or deep dive into Kasey's career or anything. It's going to be his career from my perspective and how my emotions and mindset were at during each high and low moment he went through. If you have any small idea of how his career went, you should know that my mind was all over the place the entire time. But before we get into this story, let me show you guys how I got introduced to him.
White flag this time. One to go, boys. All right, somebody's got to go different. Can't all go the same way.
Kenseth went low in one. Changes lanes. Here comes Kahne on the outside.
Just can't quite mat it right there off of turn two.
McMurray almost hit the wall exiting two and drops back.
Yeah, he lost a lot of ground right there. Last time through 3 and 4, though. Here they Kahne goes to the bottom. Kahne comes to the bottom. He gets a run. He's got a good run on him.
Side by side to the line. Kenseth. Here they come to the line.
Kahne got such a run off turn 4. Woo, baby.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how almost everyone did. It got my full-blown attention at 9 years old, and I was hooked. I wanted to know all about this guy. He was young, shy, and mild-mannered, and I felt like I could relate to him. I was into NASCAR already 3 years prior to his debut, but didn't have loyalty to any specific driver until this point. Now, everything had changed after that Rockingham race. I wanted to know where Kasey was at all times on the track. I wanted merch, fan club access, everything Kasey. And my journey as a diehard fan of his was underway. The rest of Kasey's rookie season would be more the same. It was so close yet so far away. He finished second the next week at Las Vegas, third the next week at Atlanta. All the potential was there, but he had a lot of growing pains to go through. But he was showing early on that he could hang with the big dogs. He had what it took to make it in the Cup Series, and my expectations started growing quickly week by week, knowing a win was around the corner. He won the pole at Darlington, which is a really good sign that you have what it takes, because that is a driver's track, a true driver's track. To succeed at Darlington, you have to know what you're doing, and for him to win the pole that early on, it just further solidified his status as a future star in the Cup Series. He finished 13th in that race, but the next close encounter he had with his possible first win was Texas that spring. He dominated the race, led well over 100 laps, looked like it could be his day, but he got behind in the pits somehow. Had to restart 7th late in the race, worked his way back up behind Elliott Sadler, couldn't find a way around him. He was the better car, but that kind of went on to be a trend for Kasey throughout his career. He couldn't find a way around the leader in the closing laps, even if he had the better car, and ended up finishing kind of side by side with him, half a car length behind, and it was Rockingham all over again. But still, early in the season, the potential was there. I still felt like that win was coming really soon. Everybody did. And man, he was showing some serious talent early on and got everyone's attention. He won the pole at Auto Club later that spring, kept showing his potential, how fast he was. Those Evernham cars were always fast, ran up front, qualified up front. And then Dover happens. Somehow Kasey finds himself in the lead late, and I think he had 2 tires or stayed out, and he found himself in the lead with Mark Martin behind. And all of a sudden, you know, Kasey wasn't dominating this race or anything. All of a sudden, he's in position to win again. I'm, getting up on the edge of my seat. This could be it. He's pulling away. There's less than 20 to go. I mean, it looks like this could happen. And he slips in oil and wrecks out. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, he's out of the race. I remember being so devastated by this. I was absolutely torn up by this. This was really a heartbreaker. It looked like he was going to win. There he was in position, and once again, heartbreak. So close yet so far away. That was the theme of his season. And man, this one really stuck out to me because, like I said, he wasn't the dominant car, but he just found himself in position late. They got him out front, and freaking oil, just an unforeseen circumstance, cost him, and that was just such a shock. Everybody was shell-shocked. It ruined my day, probably ruined my week. That was a big blow. And yeah, just super devastating. I just keep thinking, how can it get worse than this? You know, I was really frustrated. That was tough to swallow, but, you know, it was early in the season and we kept moving on. But then the next second place finish comes at Michigan in June, and this one really stuck out to me. He was not good early on. He was a lap down. I was already frustrated. This is how quickly my expectations were rising. I was already frustrated that Kasey was a lap down, even though he's halfway through his first season. Somehow they keep working on the car, getting it better and better, and he makes a furious rally toward the end of the race. He's as far back as 19th, 20th, over the halfway point, and he just makes a furious storming rally through the field, passing cars left and right. I don't know what they did to make the car better, but all of a sudden he's there at the end of the race, chasing down Ryan Newman. But Newman's so far ahead that it still doesn't look like winning is a feasible goal for Kasey here. It just looks like, you know, he may make it kind of exciting, but all of a sudden he gets a big run off turn 2 and he's there. Out of nowhere, this could be one of the most remarkable comebacks in recent memory in NASCAR, and it's by a rookie who's never won. And as he's making the move on Newman into 3 and 4, it looks like he's going to make it a photo finish, and somebody, a field filler, Stanton Barrett, can't remember who, crashes, maybe P.J. Jones, in turn 2, and NASCAR throws the caution and ends the race. Everybody was upset with that call. Darrell Waltrip in the booth was upset with that call. And yeah, it just took a possible photo finish and possibly Kasey's first win away from him. You know, the inconsistency of race control, that's always been a problem. Kasey was a victim of it here. And yeah, that was going to be an exciting finish. Robbed him of it. It may just be my bias, but I don't think you throw the caution there. When everybody comes back around, the race is over, they slow down. I don't believe that car in turn 2 was an issue. And yeah, that one really sticks out to me because that was another win that Kasey could have won along with Texas if things went his way, if the bounces went the right way. But he was still searching after that. And then the next time he's in the picture would be Chicagoland in July. He's leading the race late, and Tony Stewart on a restart puts him out for whatever reason. That whole year, if you look back, Tony was really going through a tough time. He was racing like a jerk, not sure what he was dealing with on or off the track, but that was a low year for Tony. Definitely ruffled a lot of feathers, and Kasey was a victim that day. I remember being so furious at Tony. I'd never really had an issue with him before until that. I was mad at Tony for a long time after that because, yeah, he just took Kasey out for whatever reason. Of course, the pit crew's fault on pit road. That was a big deal. And, yeah, still to this day, no idea what Tony was doing there. I guess he was just impatient, made a bad move. Kasey's a victim yet again. And by this point, I'm getting frustrated. You know, it's for whatever reason, I'm feeling more and more urgency for Kasey to get his first win because it keeps getting so close and keeps getting taken away from him. I don't realize it's just his rookie year. You know, it's not easy to just go out there and win, no matter how close you're getting. He still has a lot to learn, but my expectations are rising quickly. You know, I'm 10. You know, I don't have the rational thoughts that you have as an adult. I just think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to win. And, you know, I'm starting to get spoiled by already how much potential he's showing. But he rebounded from that nicely. He's running in the top 10. He's still showing promise. He finishes second at Auto Club, second again. But that wasn't a situation where he should have won. He didn't have the dominant car that day. So I wasn't that caught up over that because I still feel like he was competitive. He was still showing that promise. He still had everybody invested. My expectations continued to rise. But now the chase is coming up. This is the first year of the chase. And of course I want Kasey to make that. He's right on the edge of it. I think he goes into the Richmond race to the good. He's 9th, I believe, or 10th in the standings. And then he has a terrible race. He goes out there and lays an egg. The car was bad. He was really slow out there. Dale Jr. spun him out. He was just not good that night, and he ended up just missing out on the chase in his rookie season. But for whatever reason, I wasn't too torn up about it. I think by this point I'd finally gotten the point that this wasn't just going to be a situation like Tony Stewart in his rookie year or Jimmy Johnson where he just lit the world on fire. He hadn't won yet, and he just needed some time to develop. He still was raw, still had a lot to learn. All I wanted now was for him to get his first win. That was my focus. So for the most part, early in the chase, Kasey's not really a factor. He's just kind of riding along. He's having a few crashes. He's struggling. But then Charlotte comes. This would turn out to be one of his best tracks. And the Evernham guys gave him a ride of a lifetime in this race. It was going to take something unforeseen once again to ruin this. He has by far the best car. He's at least a tenth or two faster than everyone else. He leads over 200 laps. It's his show. He's sneaking up the show, and something breaks in the right front, hits the wall. He's out of the race. For the third time this year, Kasey wrecks from the lead. Another heartbreak. It's like Dover all over again. And man, this one was really tough. At this point, you're demoralized. You're starting to lose hope. You're thinking, what do I have to do to get a win if you're Kasey? For me, I'm just like, it's just another weekend. By this point, I'm set up for failure. It's not a good sign when this early on you're just waiting for something to go wrong. And sure enough, it did. And I feel like Kasey's sprint car disciplines didn't help him transition into the stock car world because you have to take care of your equipment. And I don't think Kasey was as good at that early on. That reared its ugly head here. And I think he should have taken better care of the car. He may have been running it too hard. And yeah, I mean, this was his race. No one was touching him that night, and he beat himself. And so after this, I mean, the rest of the year was pretty much a lost cause. It was just about finishing the year out as best you could, which he did. He finished respectable, 13th in his rookie year points. He was the rookie of the year. And so 2004, his rookie season comes to a close. So to summarize his rookie season, I'm disappointed, but I'm hopeful. The potential is there. He finished second 5 times, won several poles. He's shown, like I said, that he can run with the big dogs. He has what it takes. He's not intimidated. He goes out there and he takes care of business. And he's shown that he has what it takes to make a long career out of this. I'm hopeful, and I feel like this momentum is going to carry into 2005, and things are looking up. He's going to get that first win. And it's time to take that next step. And maybe 2005 is the year that Kasey explodes onto the scene, and it's his breakout season.
Kasey Kahne bounced off the wall, turn 2. Wow.
But just remember, unlike when we were on the air,
Trouble down in turn.
another transition. That's Kasey Kahne in the 9.
Caution is out. Kahne has tagged the wall and hard.
He may have got a little help, but it could have been a tire. What do you think, Steve?
Kasey Kahne has crashed, and that will put us under caution at lap 100. The fellow who didn't need this caution right there, last year's runner-up in this race by inches, Kasey Kahne. Darrell, Kasey Kahne has crashed hard coming out of turn 4.
Yeah, all by itself, Mike. Back
Kasey Kahne has just slammed the front straightaway wall. Came around coming off turn number 4, and that will put us under caution at lap 285. Cars hit the wall, and it is Kasey Kahne up at turn 7. And that will put us under caution for the 4th time today.
Fun times. Have you ever heard of the term sophomore slump? Because that's what happened to Kasey, at least at the first part of 2005. Absolute disaster. I think the new Charger body may have given Evernham some troubles, but man, this was really ugly. Did not see this coming. I was very frustrated. I was very upset. Where was the 2004 Kasey? What's going on here? I did not like what I was seeing. And at this point, my expectations remain the same. I just want him to win a race. Forget about everything else. Forget about the points. Just please let Kasey get into victory lane and let everything else take care of itself. He can start feeling better about himself. He can get that monkey off his back, and everything will fall into place. 10 DNFs total. They were piling up. The frustration was piling up. Man, this was a bad year. 23rd in points is where he finished. He was an afterthought for the chase. Again, I didn't care about that, but for him to regress that badly, I did not expect that. And again, keep in mind, I'm a kid. I don't really have a grasp on what goes on with NASCAR mechanically. I don't understand, the learning curve that these guys go through. I just saw what I saw in 2004 and thought, what's up? Why can't he win a race? I wasn't, I was naive to the whole thing. Again, the new bodies may have given Dodge some trouble. Looking back, Kasey just had that sophomore slump where I think he put too much pressure on himself as well to build off 2004. And it did not pay off. It was just not a good year, forgettable year. Oh wait, something did happen in 2005.
You're right though, DW. The last thing this 9 car wants to see right now is a caution in this last lap and a half.
Just come on, baby. Get to the white flag.
And he'll do it this time. White flag's in the air.
Once he crosses this start-finish line.
The biggest last lap of Kasey Kahne's young racing life right here.
And no pressure from behind.
He took over the number 9 from legend Bill Elliott, who served as his mentor for a season, and now it's all his own. Off turn 4. Kasey Kahne is a winner at last.
Do it, dude. Look out now. You're headed into the fence.
He stopped again.
Look at Ray, so composed.
This was 2 days after my birthday. What a present. Kasey's first win finally happens at Richmond, with Tony Stewart, his mentor, behind him in second, congratulating him on the way to victory lane. Man, what a moment this was. I had a friend over at my house watching the race with me from my party earlier in the day, and we witnessed this happen, and that's just something you can't make up. It was an organic moment. I was truly happy. I was elated. I was totally ecstatic. I will never forget your favorite driver's first win. That only happens one time, and it was everything I dreamed about and more. Just that feeling was it was pure joy. I mean, I thought finally Kasey has arrived. That relieving feeling with joy at the same time, there's just nothing like it. Wow, it's just crazy that in such a bad year, it took place in such a bad year. This was almost the only high point. Definitely came out of nowhere, but it happened. He dominated. He was the best car that night. And man, what a good feeling this was. I was probably grinning from ear to ear the rest of the week, the next week at school. This was truly a great moment, and obviously something I'll never forget. This is what I had built up for over a year, it seemed like, and finally it happened. This totally reset everything for me, and kind of unfortunately raised my expectations even more. Thought this may turn the year around. It obviously didn't, but hey, I mean, surely with that first win, the next one's coming. He's shown that he's not a fluke. He's just got to get everything together with that 9 team. Things are going to come together for 2006. So my expectations going into 2006 were cautiously optimistic. I knew Kasey's potential was still there, but coming off the year I just witnessed, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what Kasey we were going to get. I just wanted him to keep winning. Again, I'm still young, but I expect Kasey to break through at any point. He's still super young. He's got a lot of career ahead of him. He's got a slick new paint job. This may have been my favorite paint scheme that Kasey ran in 2006. He goes into the year, and this happens.
Kasey Kahne scores the second win of his career in the Golden Corral 500. The first man to win from the front row, the 11th different winner at Texas, Kasey Kahne wins the Samsung Radio Shack 500. Engine number 9 brings it to the finish line. Kasey Kahne wins the Coke 600.
But off pit road moments ago, taking 2 tires, Kasey Kahne in the Evernham Dodge edges his way back out, and ahead of Carl Edwards and Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kasey Kahne, the camera's following him. It is official, and that's your winner. Kasey Kahne walking in the rain, pulling his hair back. And let's take you back if we could. So Kasey Kahne, your winner here in Michigan, rain shortened 129 laps.
Oh, he's out of gas. He's out of gas.
It's out of gas, Jimmy.
And watch Kasey Kahne come roaring by in that red car. Kasey Kahne to the lead, and will come to the white flag this time. Second, Kasey Kahne comes off of turn 4. He won last night in the Busch race. Kasey Kahne sweeps at California and celebrates his win tonight here at California. Kasey Kahne looking for win number 6 and trying to improve his status in the chase for the championship. Kasey Kahne sweeps at Charlotte.
Yeah, he won 6 races. I remember that Atlanta win, first of the year. It was a Monday race. I was watching it. I somehow missed school that day, and I remember watching it, and I was thrilled. And then from there, I did not know what I was about to witness. The Coke 600, that was a big one I remember. He dominated that race. He was the car to beat in that race. I was really on the edge of my seat in that one. I was restless. I was, every little moment that Kasey wasn't leading, I was frustrated. I was like, he's got to win this. He's got to win this. I was full on perfectionist mode. I was kind of unbearable to be around while watching him. This is the Kasey we all expected. And for it to finally come to fruition in his third season, it felt like the right time, and it felt like this was it for him. But with the wins, also came the inconsistency. That was still there. He was still up and down. And that hurt his point situation. It hurt his chances to win a championship. Early on in the season, he looked like a prime championship contender. He looked like one of the favorites. And that 2006 chase was crazy. Jimmy Johnson, that turned out to be the first of 5 in a row for him, but he almost didn't win that. He had to come back in the last few races and win that. It was a rally for him. That chase was kind of wide open. If Kasey had the consistency, he could have been right there, but he ended up finishing 8th. Which I was okay with at the time because it was his first chase, but looking back, that was awfully disappointing for that year he had. 6 wins and to finish 8th in the chase. That definitely was a little disappointing, but the wins were my main focus, and having just witnessed that in 2006, I figured it was going up from here. The trajectory was finally pointing up, and we were going to get a more developed and polished Kasey from here on out. My expectations were high again. And they were where they were at in 2004, except even higher because the results were showing. And yeah, going into 2007, I was ready. I thought the sky was the limit, and things are going to start kicking into gear. But then in 2007, the car of tomorrow emerges. And again, this is back before social media. You couldn't just figure everything out at the palm of your hand. I didn't know about the car tomorrow until it debuted at Bristol that year. I had seen commercials about it and didn't think it was real. I thought this was just some joke. And it debuted, and I hated it. Of course, everybody else hated it. It looked ugly. It raced bad. But little did I know this was going to have a devastating effect on Kasey's career, because NASCAR would alternate the car tomorrow with the Gen 6 in 2007, and that had to confuse a lot of teams, and Evernham was a prime victim of that. 2007 turned out to be another rocky year for Kasey. It was like 2005, but without the win. Kasey would go winless in 2007, his first winless season since his rookie year, and this was awfully disappointing. Coming off of the season he had, the inconsistency was a theme, and I start getting an idea of what I'm dealing with here. This is kind of what Kasey might end up being. He's just up and down. He can't quite channel that success and that potential and, just turn it into a consistency. He's going to have to scratch and claw his way to success. And I didn't really know what to think. I was frustrated for much of 2007. A lot of it I don't remember as far as he goes. The only race I remember that stuck out to me was Bristol, the night race. Out of nowhere, Kasey absolutely dominated that race in the car of tomorrow. It was like Charlotte in 04. He was stinking up the show. It looked like a foregone conclusion he was going to win. And somehow Carl Edwards chased him down and ended up winning the race. I didn't like Carl Edwards back then, and I was not happy about that. I remember thinking this might be Kasey's one chance to win this year with how bad it's gone. And that was disappointing because I felt like that was the one chance he had to win in 2007, make the year feel better like 2005, and he let it slip away. And I remember that race and not a whole lot else. It was just a lot of disappointment. And my emotions were all over the place. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know where Kasey's career was headed, where his success was going to be, but this was definitely a disappointment, a letdown. It's just so weird that, the first 4 years of Kasey's career were exactly up and down. There was no in between. It was, a lot of hope and promise in 04, a ton of disappointment in 05, and then, a breakout year in 06. And then disappointment again in 07. It was just exactly, perfectly up and down. And I remember being just so disappointed and so frustrated through 07. It was kind of hard to watch the races. I couldn't really enjoy them like I wanted to because Kasey just wasn't running good. It made the sport less fun when he wasn't running good. One thing that I liked that was going on, though, is Kasey was in a lot of commercials. And this was going back before that, but I liked seeing Kasey in commercials. I just thought that meant he was relevant. He mattered. He was a big name, and so I always remember I enjoyed watching his commercials. And he won that Busch race at Charlotte in 07. It was just a Busch race, but I remember being pretty excited about that because I thought that might get him back on track. I remember that very clearly, and yeah, I mean, I thought, okay, at least he won in a race. It's not a cup race, but I was halfway satisfied, but obviously it was all for naught. He just kind of, it was his favorite racetrack and, or one of his best racetracks. And he kind of beat up on the, the lesser talented guys. But I remember being mildly excited about that. But, yeah, it turned out not to, lead to any more results. So for 2008, my expectations are, they're kind of just floating around. They're not really in a certain place. I just hope Kasey gets back to, his 2006 self, but with more consistency. I'm just kind of waiting around for something good to happen. But then the Bud deal happens. He gets Budweiser on the car, fills in Dale Jr.'s shoes. And I'm thinking, I don't really think a whole lot of it, but, it's at least kind of a fresh start for him. Maybe this is something that he can, use as something to feel good about and, realize that he's still a big name in the sport. You got to be somebody to have Budweiser on your car. So, yeah, I was pretty hopeful going into 08. He didn't start out great. But then the All-Star race comes around, and having not won the year before, he's got a race in the Open. And I'm obviously very nervous about that. I'm very on edge, and, I'm obviously thinking he has to win the Open. If Kasey Kahne doesn't make the All-Star race, that is devastating. I would have been beside myself. And the whole Open, I'm a mess. I'm a wreck. I'm just on pins and needles the whole time, hoping he finds a way to get in, and he wasn't good. I'm thinking, at Charlotte, he's really good here. He should win here, and he struggles. He doesn't win the Open. I'm not happy at all. But then, there's the fan vote. Of course the fans are going to vote for Kasey Kahne. He's one of the most popular drivers. But I still wasn't satisfied with that. I'm like, he should have won. I don't care about the fan vote. He should have won the Open to get in. But nevertheless, he's in the race. I don't think much else of it because he doesn't have a good car, so, what does it matter? But then he wins the All-Star race. I remember the last few laps of that. Greg Biffle's kind of there, but not really. I was just, again, my guard is up. The way Kasey's career is going, I was just thinking something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. I was very nervous those last few laps, and this is when the All-Star race was still a really big deal. He wins the All-Star race, and man, I was so happy about that. It was on Speed Channel. They kind of made it their own thing. It was a big, big deal to win the All-Star race then, and I was so happy about that. It didn't really mean a whole lot as far as his future, how successful he was going to be in the future, but winning that race was a big deal to me, and I remember that night very well, and it was very special. And then he wins the Coca-Cola 600. He kind of fell into his lap. Tony Stewart had a big lead, and he had a tire go down with like 2 or 3 to go, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. It didn't matter to me. I'll take a win any way I can get it. Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. I was just kind of like whatever that whole night, and then all of a sudden he wins, and all of a sudden I'm excited. And then 2 weeks later he wins the pole and the race at Pocono, and things are starting to look up again. This is kind of a refreshing feeling for me. Maybe Kasey's coming around, but for whatever reason, 2008 I just didn't have a good feeling. Like I knew he wasn't still in top form. He was, having decent success, but I still didn't have a great feeling about 2008. I remember him finishing second to Dale Jr. under caution to break Jr.'s long winless streak. I remember that, but starting in 2009, for whatever reason, the years 2009 to 2011 are kind of a blur for me. I don't remember a whole lot about them, just the bigger races here and there. Kasey was kind of just there, he wasn't a prominent championship contender. He wasn't consistently up there winning races. He was just kind of there, and my expectations are kind of once again stuck in neutral. I don't know how I feel about where Kasey's headed. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love the guy. I mean, I'm with him through thick and thin, but I just don't know where he's headed. I don't know if he's ever going to be a superstar. I'm just kind of frustrated. I feel like he should be running better. That 2006 season was the worst thing to happen because I just felt like that was supposed to happen the rest of the way. It obviously didn't, but 2009 gets started, and this is where Evernham merges with Gillette, and things start getting kind of murky. Like, I don't know, it just feels like not a dark time in Kasey's career, but just kind of a mundane time. He's just kind of there. 2009, he doesn't start out the year great at all. But then in the summer, he wins Sonoma. This is something I never thought would happen. Kasey struggled mightily at road courses early in his career. He was never in the conversation to win a road course race. And he won at Sonoma, and I remember being so shocked about that. I was very surprised. He had wine in Victory Lane with a king. That was really cool. That was definitely something that I'll always look back on like, Kasey won at Sonoma. I can't believe that just happened. And then on Labor Day weekend, he wins at Atlanta, one of his best tracks. And it's starting to look like he's going to make the chase. He does. But again, it's kind of like 2008. I'm just not satisfied with what's going on. I just know Kasey's better than this. You know, this whole situation he's in feels kind of like it's getting stale. I'm just not, I don't have the same excitement, the same and passion that, you know, I had in his first couple years. I'm so frustrated with what's going on. I just don't feel like Kasey's in the best situation. I'm just hoping things turn around at some point, because I still feel like he has so much potential that he's not exercising to the fullest. And he ends up finishing 10th in points. And so 2010 comes, and I've just got the same feeling, you know, nothing's really changed in my mind. I just feel like nothing has shown me that it's going to get better. Nothing has shown me that he's going to be in the position that he needs to be. And, you know, it's just kind of going through the motions, logging through the races. I remember he won his dual race at Daytona in that Winter Olympics paint scheme. I ended up somehow watching this in school, in class. We had a substitute teacher, and I found a way to watch the races, watch the dual races in class. And he finished side by side with Tony Stewart. I mean, it was a photo finish, inches. And I was very shocked by this. Just like Sonoma, Kasey was not very good at restrictor plate races. And for him to get that done, I mean, sometimes he'd run up front a little bit, but he didn't really have the concept of how the draft works. And I just didn't think he liked that race. And not many drivers did, but he was never very successful at that kind of racing. And he won his dual race. That was really cool. But that didn't really, you know, give me an extra spark for the season or anything. I was just excited about that. You know, it's a dual race. I mean, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. But that was really cool. And then I remember that violent Pocono crash he had where he went up onto the wall. You know, it didn't really scare me or anything. I was just like, whoa. You know, Kasey, I think that was probably the worst wreck he'd ever been in as far as visually. But yeah, just that season ended up just being forgettable. You know, nothing really crazy happened. He finished second in the July race at Daytona, so for whatever reason, I guess they found modest restrictor plate success that year. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember honestly anything about 2010 other than those couple of highlights for Kasey. It was just a forgettable year, and like I was saying, this whole situation he's in, it just felt like it was stale and nothing was going his way. He needed something to, you know, give him a kick in the rear, give the team a kick in the rear. And I just wasn't, you know, nothing was moving the needle for me. It was just a frustrating time to be a Kasey Kahne fan. Just nothing happening, nothing exciting happening. You know, he's still young, but, you know, how much longer can this go before something, you know, turns around? I'm not really thinking anything at this point other than something's got to change, something's got to turn around, or, you know, who knows where his career's going to be headed. And then 2011 happens, and he's got a new deal. He's got a new team. And it's with Red Bull. This was out of nowhere. I felt like Kasey needed a change, but I didn't know about this. For whatever reason, I was not that excited about this because Red Bull wasn't that good of a team. They just, you know, they were kind of a backmarker at this point. You know, didn't have very much success, and I didn't think Kasey belonged here. I didn't think he had any business being here. A lot of people liked that paint scheme. You know, it was a good-looking paint scheme, I won't lie, but yeah, just a very odd move that I didn't see coming, but you know, I was gonna support him no matter what. It didn't really affect me too much. I just thought he still deserved better. He still belonged in a better situation than this, but maybe he could reprove himself all over again and get back into a top ride with top equipment, and we'll see what happens, you know. And he finished in the top 15 in the first 4 races, but then he kind of went through a big slump. He won the pole at Darlington. Finished good there, 4th, but it kind of ended up turning out like most of his, you know, these last few seasons. He was just kind of riding along, just, you know, idling around, not making a whole lot of moves. He was just there, and it was just like the last couple years all over again. And once again, I kind of felt myself in a fog with Kasey. I just didn't know what to expect anymore. I knew he wasn't a championship contender that year, but that didn't really matter to me. I just wanted Kasey to win again. I wanted him to be successful again, find a way back into a top ride, at least, audition for that, look the part. And just back to more frustration. I didn't know where he was headed. I didn't know how long this was going to last. I just hoped at some point he got back into a competitive ride again. But then, toward the very end of the year, he wins at Phoenix. This was another kind of random, out-of-nowhere win that I didn't see coming. But I was excited about it, I was like, hey, Kasey wins again. That was kind of a wake-up moment for me, something to feel good about. It just gave me a reason to, smile again. Those weren't happening a lot. And yeah, that was just kind of out of nowhere, but I was excited about that, and maybe it was going to give him some momentum going into 2012. Of course, I didn't know what 2012 held yet, but I was hopeful. That gave me some hope again. So then we get to 2012, and Kasey joins the powerhouse that is Hendrick Motorsports, and he has full backing sponsorship from Farmers Insurance, Quaker State, a couple other sponsors. And obviously this is big. This is possibly the biggest move of his career. Turns out Mark Martin was hogging this ride for the last 2 years. No, in all seriousness, this was big for Kasey, and I was very optimistic about this and thought this was a big turning point in his career. And it turned out to look that way. It turned out to be a move that looked like it might be paying off. He didn't start the year out very good, but he turned it on halfway through the spring, really started clicking off top 10s, and he wins the Coke 600 again, his third one. For whatever reason, Kasey was really good at that race, and to win that crown jewel, the only 600-mile race in the Cup Series, the prestige of that race, the longevity of it, and for him to win that 3 times, not many drivers can say they did that, and for him to accomplish that was really big. I was obviously very happy about that, and my expectations are sky high. They're as high as they've ever been, back to 2006 mode, I guess you could say, because it just felt like it made sense. Like Kasey was a good fit in that 5 car, and I felt like with teammates like Jeff and Dale and Jimmy, I felt like, what can't he accomplish here? It seemed like a no-brainer move, and it seemed like his career was taking off for good. And he wins New Hampshire later in that year. I was very surprised about that. New Hampshire, he was decent there, but he was never like in the mix to win there. And I remember he kind of stole that win from Denny Hamlin, but that was another pleasant surprise victory. I wasn't surprised about Charlotte, of course, but pleasantly surprised about the New Hampshire win. And not a whole lot else happened, honestly, that year for Kasey as far as super big highlights. But he was in the mix more. He was up front more. He was taking care of his equipment better. There were the DNFs every now and then, but of course, that's just going to happen. And they didn't seem as frequent as in the past. So this was a move that was definitely starting to pay off, and I was really liking what I was seeing. A couple other notable things about this year is I was noticing a obvious difference in Kasey's overall performance as far as tracks that he normally didn't have success at. He was all of a sudden up front at restrictor plate races consistently. He was in the mix at other tracks that he normally wouldn't be in, so that Hendrick difference, you could tell visibly, was making a difference for him. And that also happened to be the year I went to my first Cup race at Talladega. He finished top 5 in that race, I think 4th. I was again pleasantly surprised about that. And then I went to the July race at Daytona that summer, and he was in the mix in the last laps on that one. He was in the top 5, and there was a wreck on the last lap. He got caught up in that, but I still think he ended up in the top 10. And so that I remember that being just a big deal. Him running up front at pretty much every track now. He won the pole at Martinsville that spring. He blew his engine in that race, but the fact that he won the pole at Martinsville, he'd never done that before, I don't think. And so the results were showing right away, and I just felt like this was the break he needed, and everything was going to fall into place for him, and he may go after that first championship. And he makes the chase rather easily this time. One frustrating part of Kasey's career up to this point was he was always on the chase bubble. Whether he made it or not, he was always on the bubble, and you had to sweat out that last cutoff race at Richmond every year. And, he didn't win the championship, but he finished 4th in the points, easily his highest finish ever. And man, I was very happy about that. And I was thinking, first year at Hendrick, he finishes 4th. I mean, it's clear that the championship could be around the corner if he keeps this consistency up. This is the one thing he lacked, was consistency in his career. Now he's getting that. It seemed like the right hand was dealt to him, and it seemed like he couldn't possibly screw this up. All right, so 2013 comes, and this turned out to be a frustrating season. In the Daytona 500, Kasey is running up front. He's showing that well-rounded Hendrick equipment, resources, all that stuff. Again, he previously couldn't run well consistently in restrictor plate races, and in the Daytona 500, he's really all speed weeks. He's fast, and so that right there shows me that he's at the right place, because now he can run well anywhere, and I'm excited. And of course he gets caught up in a wreck. Who knows if he would have actually finished well in that race, but he was up front. I mean, he was in the top 5 when he wrecked, and so yeah, that was frustrating. But I'd kind of, to this point, accepted the fact that Kasey was probably never going to win a restrictor plate race unless just some complete luck went his way, which is kind of what you need to win those anyway, but you also have to have the right mindset for it, and he just never did. So by this point, I was kind of already accepting of that fact. But moving on to the real season, this would turn out to be the year that Matt Kenseth was a thorn in Kasey's side. Kasey finished second to him several times in a race that he could have won pretty much every time. Starting at Las Vegas, I remember this well. Matt Kenseth is on the radio barking to get the lap cars out of the way. Kasey's right on his tail. And like so many other times in his career, Kasey could not find a way around him. He was just, I don't know what the deal was. I mean, I'm sure his car was at least equal, but he just could not find a way around him. And so he had to settle for second. And yeah, that would be the start of a very frustrating trend that would turn out to happen in 2013. But then he wins at Bristol. That was something I never saw coming. Kasey was decent at Bristol. He had a couple races, where he looked like he could win, especially back in 07, but I just never actually expected him to win there. I don't know why, but that was a very pleasant surprise to me. I was very happy about that, and looking back, that was definitely one of the more surprising wins of his career, because he just statistically wasn't great at short tracks. I know he got his first win at Richmond, but he didn't consistently run well there. But in the midst of all the frustration was that. And, going back to 2012, I thought he was picking up right where he left off. He gets that win early in the season. This is the earliest Kasey had won in the season since Atlanta in 2006. That was another reason I was so surprised. Kasey rarely won a race or even looked like he was going to win a race that early in the season. He was usually a slower starter, didn't get going until late spring, early summer, and that was a big deal to get that win early in the season, solidify his points position. And so I was pretty optimistic about 2013 at this point, thinking he might be in position to get that first championship, or at least get close to it. And at Hendrick, where again it looks like he's running well at every track now, it looked like the possibilities were endless. And going through these next few weeks, he's still running pretty good. He's running in the top 10 to 15. But then at Kansas, he finishes second to Matt Kenseth again. This time, it wasn't like he definitely should have won, but just, at this point in Kasey's career, he's finished second so many times. It's just gotten to a point where you expect it, but, the frustration is already there. And to finish second to the same guy over and over again, that was really wearing on me and really just driving me crazy to no end. I was just like, how does this guy keep finishing ahead of Kasey all the time? I just didn't understand it. So that was frustrating, but like I said, it wasn't like Kasey dominated the race and let it get away. That one didn't eat at me as much as some of the others, but yeah, once again, Matt Kenseth first, Kasey Kahne second, just becoming a very irritating trend that I wasn't sitting well with. And then we get to Talladega, and I went to this race. It was a wild day. If you live around Alabama or in the South, you know the weather down here gets crazy, and I think we experienced all 4 seasons of weather that day. There was 2 separate rain delays. Both of them were lengthy. Didn't even look like the race was going to complete that day. But Kasey, once again, just like Daytona, was running up front, up there battling for the lead, and right in front of me as he passes the start-finish line, Kyle Busch, spins him out, gets into the back of him, and causes the big wreck in turn 1. And I saw him. I mean, I remember it vividly, right in front of me. Just it felt like slow motion. He turned into the wall, and man, I lost it. I went crazy. I was very mad at Kyle Busch that day, and for the foreseeable future, kind of. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Kasey just can't catch a break. Even though I knew in the back of my mind that he was never going to win one of these races, it still felt like it could happen with how many times he was running up front. He just could not get the break. He could not find a way to be around at the end of these things. That was kind of the one quality that he lacked, was just having the smarts and really the luck as well to be around at the end of these things. He just could not find a way. But I put that one behind me fairly quickly. It stung a little more just because I was at the race, but in the end, it was just another race at Talladega for Kasey that he wrecked in and ended up in the infield care center. And now for the next iteration of the frustration in this season, we get to the Coca-Cola 600. Kasey's, his best race. He's won 3 of them. He's the defending winner of this race. And he's really good. He's one of the best cars, and it gets down to the end. They have a cycle of green flag stops. He comes out with a lead. He's got like a massive lead of like half a track. And NASCAR throws one of those let's bunch the field back up cautions, where they don't like how the race is playing out. It's too close to the end. It's not exciting, so let's just throw the caution for no reason. There was nothing shown as to why the caution came out. And they all line up, and everybody behind Kasey pits, and he doesn't. And so, what happens after that. Yeah, I was very frustrated after this at NASCAR, obviously. I was rarely upset at NASCAR after Kasey. I felt like, beside that Michigan win and the Michigan race in his rookie season, I was usually, NASCAR wasn't much of a factor. But this one I blamed solely on NASCAR because that's why they threw the caution. You can't convince me otherwise. And so, yeah, everybody pits behind him. And Kevin Harvick ends up passing him, and Kasey finishes, you guessed it, second. So, yeah, once again, Kasey, I've already felt like he's left several wins on the table. He could be really tearing a hole in the series right now, just completely dominating, and yet it, keeps getting taken out of his hands one way or another. And, man, I'm losing it because I know in this position Kasey's in, this opportunity he's gotten at Hendrick, the way it operates there, it's great. You have everything, at the palm of your hand, but you also have to deliver. If you're not a big name like, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson Jr., those guys, their name takes care of itself. Kasey doesn't have that. He has to perform, and he has to show that he belongs there. And so I feel the pressure with him that he needs to keep delivering on these and quit coming up short. Results are over everything. It's not just how well you run. Everybody runs well at Hendrick. You have to deliver. And so, after that, Kasey finishes 23rd at Dover. He wrecks at Pocono. He wrecks at Michigan from the lead. Another one of those deals where it looked like he may have a car to win, and they come back from commercial, I remember, and he wrecked. So I was like, oh, wow, nice. But then he finishes 6th at Sonoma, which is, I know he won there earlier, but again, just shows the versatility he's got. It's developing even more. He's showing that he can compete anywhere, and that's, bringing me optimism. But his points position, it's not the best because of the inconsistency he's showing, like always. I remember at Kentucky, it looked like he had a good car, but ended up disappointing, finishing 11th. I guess the car got worse, not sure what happened, but I thought he was going to contend that day, and, disappointing once again. Kasey was notorious for that. He would, a lot of times, run really well a lot of the day, and then end up, with not the finish he deserved, and nothing, particular would happen. His car would slightly fade through the day. I think that's just as frustrating as wrecking because, you're left wondering more what happened. Why did, the car decline that badly, throughout the day. All right, so we get to Daytona, the July race, and I remember this well. Kasey, once again, running up front. The Daytona package this year, everybody kind of remembers it was not good. It was the first year of the Gen 6, I should say. And it was kind of like the 2000 Daytona 500 all over again. Not quite as bad, but it was a train. It was single file. And we're getting down to the closing laps. Kasey is, I believe, 2nd or 3rd behind Jimmy Johnson in line. And I'm on pins and needles. I'm like, this could be it. This could be it. This could be the day Kasey finally wins at Daytona if he makes the right move. And I believe it was Marcus Ambrose turns him on the backstretch, and he hits the inside wall. Man, guys, I was so devastated. I just fell to the ground, hands over head, like I was so devastated. I should have expected it to happen because, you know, at this point, I mean, it's always happened, but for whatever reason, I was more optimistic about this than any other Daytona race. I thought this could be it, and once again, got taken from him. You know, I wish I could expand on it more, but it's just the same old story, you know, same old feeling after one of these deals, and it's just like it's death, taxes, and Kasey wrecking at Daytona. It's just, it doesn't matter what position he's in. It's not going to end well. He's not going to come out on the good end of it, and so this race really took a lot out of me. Really took the wind out of my sails, and this wrapped up, or not wrapped up, but continued a really frustrating summer for Kasey, a miserable summer for Kasey. He was wrecking a lot. It was a summer slump, and once again, these opportunities to win keep, you know, going out the window, and it's looking like disappointment all over again. So close yet so far, and so we move on. Finishes third at Indianapolis a couple of weeks later, and then he wins at Pocono for the second time. He got I remember it was a restart with Jeff Gordon alongside him, and I was, you know, my guard was up, my Kasey Kahne fan guard was up, knowing that this wasn't going to end well. There's no way he's going to beat Jeff Gordon on a restart here, but, you know, I know Jeff wasn't the greatest on restarts, but I still thought he could outmaneuver Kasey here, and Kasey got a launch. He got a launch into turn one, and I knew this was a chance because he had a really good car this day, and I felt like he couldn't let this one slip, and he was, for once, he came through when it mattered most. Kasey was not very good at that, but for once he came through there, and he wins, and that really lifted my spirits because I had been down, because I knew, you know, his cars were fast, but he wasn't showing the results he needed to. Finally, he gets a win to feel good about himself and hopefully get things back on track. And yeah, I remember that well. I was so pumped about that restart, and obviously fired up the rest of the day. But then he follows it up with a 34th at Watkins Glen, still somewhat struggling at the road courses. Ran well at Sonoma, but still inconsistent. And then we get to Bristol, the night race, and the next Matt Kenseth situation happens. And this one was the worst of all of them. Kasey was all over the back of Matt, all over him. I know he had the better car, but as we've stated before, could not find a way around him. Do I sound like a broken record yet? I was extremely frustrated after this. I knew he left it on the table. Another win he easily could have scored. Should have swept Bristol that year. Those other seconds were races he could have won. This is one he should have won. I remember ESPN talking after the race extensively, like, why didn't Kasey make a move? Why, he could have just moved him out of the way. And, you know, while I am for clean driving and Kasey is a clean driver, I was like, yes, why Kasey? Why didn't you just move him out of the way? At this point, when he's finished in front of you so many times, at some point it's got to get to a point where you just have to take matters into your own hands. I'm not saying wreck him, but do something to, you know, show some aggression and make that move and show that you're different. I really was upset after this race. You know, the seconds were getting old. Matt Kenseth was getting old. I was pretty torn up after this one because I knew Kasey should have won this race, and in the end it goes down as a 0 in the win column. So yeah, just super upsetting. And then he finishes 36th at Atlanta, one of his best tracks. Not sure what happened there. And we get to Richmond, the cutoff race, and Kasey makes the chase, but, you know, he's once again on the bubble. But, you know, of course he makes the chase. That was kind of the bare minimum expectation for him. But I still wasn't feeling too great about things. I mean, I knew he had the speed, of course, but I just didn't think he was going to win the championship. This clearly wasn't like 2012. And he just doesn't have a great chase. Finishes 12th at Chicago, 37th at New Hampshire. You know, he finished second at Charlotte in the fall race. But, you know, at this point, second means absolutely nothing. I've had enough of second. 36th at Talladega, of course. 27th at Martinsville. Has a top 5 at Texas and Phoenix. Phoenix finishes second, of course. So, wraps up the year finishing 13th at Homestead, and he finishes 12th in the points, last in the chase. But again, this is kind of like 2004 all over again. So close yet so far away. He did have a couple of wins, but that's not good enough anymore. Just a couple of wins here and there. We're not at the point like in 2008 when we just needed him to win again. We need Kasey to perform. We need him to be in the mix for the championship, not floating around 10th in points, 10th to 12th, winning every now and then, constantly finishing second, constantly, having those frustrating moments. We need Kasey to take a step up for once and really show that he's going to be a major threat to win a championship. If he's going to stick around at Hendrick, if he's going to solidify himself as one of the very best in NASCAR, it's kind of just the same pattern. And at this point, I know what Kasey is. He's not a Jeff Gordon. He's not a Jimmy Johnson, Tony Stewart-like superstar. But I'm still hopeful that he's going to turn things around and have one of those seasons where he gets close to a championship. At this point, I don't know if he's ever going to win a championship. I mean, that's not really on my mind as much as it used to be. But even at Hendrick, of course, I know the potential is there. And so I'm just hoping he at least, my next goal is just for him to be in the top 5 of the championship toward the end of the season and show that he has what it takes to get to that level, because he has everything around him, no excuses, all the equipment, all the personnel. He has every reason to go out there and make it happen. And so we get to 2014, and man, this season would be a roller coaster. This was the first year, of course, of the new playoff format. And yeah, I mean, I went into this season about the same as going into 2013. I had, cautious optimism about it, thinking, okay, maybe this is the year he breaks out. I felt like it was at any moment, in any year, any part of a year, he was going to break out at Hendrick. And we get to the Daytona 500, and he has that infamous penalty for speeding on pit road to avoid a wrecked car. This was baffling. Kasey had a speeding penalty because of the electronic timing system, the way it works. If you're over the speed limit, and NASCAR sees that on the computer, and he was clearly avoiding a wrecked car. I guess he's supposed to stop and get wrecked. One of those, NASCAR's made many of these decisions before that make absolutely no sense. But Kasey was a victim of it here, and I was like, oh boy, this is how this season's going to go. No, I didn't think that, because, the Daytona 500 is a race in itself. But yeah, it ruins his day. He finishes 31st. And so, yeah, just once again, got to swallow that one, move on, just like the rest of them. And so the next few races, Kasey's running okay, but not great. He wrecks at Auto Club, wrecks at Darlington, and when he's not wrecking, he's running around 10th. And this isn't a good sign. I'm like, what is going on here? This is even a bigger step back than 2013. At least 2013, he had the speed. Now the speed isn't quite what it needs to be. But he gets to Talladega. I went to this race, and he finishes 8th, which was a big win to me. Kasey never finishes these races, ever. He gets caught up in a wreck every single time, but somehow he avoided them all. I mean, he got close several times. I don't know how he avoided them. And I was like, okay, Kasey finishes 8th at Talladega. That's a win. I'll take it, especially, when I go to it. I just want Kasey to run well. That's all I ask. And so I was happy about that. I remember that. Finishes 3rd at Kansas the next week, but he's after that, he's still just not running well. And so we get to the All-Star race, and I remember he was great in this race. He was running super well. He was so fast. He won a segment. He was looking like the car to beat. And I remember this. I had a 3rd shift job for a little bit, and so I had to miss the end of it. And for whatever reason, I had a bad feeling. I was like, I bet something happened to him. It couldn't be going this well. And sure enough, the next morning, I came home and found out he wrecked. He hit the wall. I was like, of course. This kind of shows you where my mind's at now. I'm just like, it's to the point where I don't expect anything good to happen. He finishes 14th the next week at the Coke 600. Just meh. Man, he's still running like that. Wrecks again at Pocono. Then he picks it up a little bit. 3 straight top 10s. But, nothing's going too great. He's just not running great. Not running as well as he needs to. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know why he's taking a step back from the first 2 years. But it's to a point now where Kasey is going to have to win a race. Keep in mind, you have to win now to be in the chase. And I'm like, yeah, he's just got to win a race. I don't want him to point his way in, and I don't think he's going to be able to point his way in. And so I was getting pretty desperate. and I was circling Atlanta as the track he was going to have to get it done. That was the race before Richmond. I know he hadn't run well there lately, but I just knew if he was going to win, it was going to be there. And so I remember watching like all the activities leading up to that all weekend, practice, qualifying, and I was tuned in. I was wanting to know how well Kasey's car was doing, where he was on the speed charts, all of that, because I was locked in. I was all in on Atlanta. And the race he starts 10th, but the race starts and he's not running great. Again, he's running like around 17th, and I'm just like, maybe it's just not meant to be. But then he starts making his way up, and he ends up getting to the front, and I'm like, well, okay, at least he's showing some fight. But then these late cautions start happening, and he keeps getting shuffled on these restarts, with pit stops and all, and I'm like, yeah, that's just going to be one of those deals where he should win, but he's not going to because of circumstances. And he's leading late, and when final caution comes out and he pits, he chooses to pit, and he restarts third. And to this point, I'm still thinking, he's not going to win. It's just not meant to be. And when as quickly as he took the lead on that restart, I'm like, oh my God, Kasey is determined. He is finally showing that aggression, that determination he needs to get this done. I remember being so taken aback by that, and he is leading in the closing laps, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not moving. I'm not saying a word. I'm just a statue. I'm just so frozen with anxiety. I'm like, is this really about to happen? And coming off turn 4, I leap up and I go crazy. Guys, I go absolutely crazy. Probably the most elated I've been for a Kasey win since his first one. I'm not kidding. And I went absolutely insane. You would think he won the championship. I was celebrating as hard as I ever have. And guess who finished second behind him? Matt Kenseth. That made it even sweeter. But yeah, I was so thrilled, and the relief, the joy, it was all there again. I felt like I was experiencing his first win all over again. And I guess just the fact that, this was the first year of the Chase playoff format, and knowing that I wanted him to be a part of that. This is before we knew how, flawed it was. Winning a race was that much, it meant that much more. And so I guess that's one of the reasons why I was so excited. And just because he hadn't won forever, he was winless in 2014 until this point, and I just felt like he was missing out. He should be among this group, and he's not. And to win the week before the cutoff race, just everything came together to make a purely thrilling win happen for Kasey, and I just could not believe he came. He was not great in that race, and he showed up at the end because he knew he had to, and he took that race when everybody else was trying to take it from him. For once, he flipped the script, and he won a race that he typically doesn't win. And again, I told you guys, I circled this race. I knew something about this race, gave me a feeling that he might do it this weekend. And for it to just all come to fruition like that, it was just such a thrilling moment, and then one I'll never forget. So I was just, I was so relieved and so happy. I almost didn't really care what happened the rest of the season. I did, but for that moment, that night, I was just glad that Kasey won that race. And so the chase starts, and everybody's anxious and curious to see how it all works out. It's 3 rounds. It's basically the same as it is today, except today the points carry over more. This was the Verall first edition of it, where every round the points just reset. It was basically a lottery to win the championship, which is of course messed up. Thanks, Brian France. But he runs okay the first 3 races. But at Dover, he's not running great, but he's in position to make the next round. That's all I cared about, obviously. He's on the cutoff line. Again, I'm used to this, but I'm still nervous. And he's just limping along. His car's not great, but he's in position. I'm just praying a caution doesn't come out and ruin the whole thing. Caution doesn't come out. Jeff Gordon wins, but Kasey survives, and all 4 Hendrick cars move on. So I'm relieved. He's in the next round. He's got life. And in a way, this format favored Kasey more because it was more random. You know, Kasey wasn't showing up to that point that he could win a championship in the season-long format or even the chase format. He was going to need a little bit more of a radical way of winning it. And so this format actually favored him. Now, I don't like it, but looking back, that was the case. But he gets to the second round, and he's in position once again to make it. Talladega's the cutoff race. I'm absolutely terrified. And on the last lap, it's, again, on the bubble. That's all he ever knows. On the last lap, he's in position. In the tri-oval, he's in position, and then gets passed by like a couple cars. And I'm waiting on the, results. Did he make it? Did he make it? This is before they had, the live lap by lap, who's where. And he didn't make it. I was not surprised at all. I was like, you know what? I bet he didn't. I was just, again, my Kasey Kahne tendencies. My thinking habits. I was like, yeah, no, I bet he didn't. And sure enough, I was like, oh well, at least he made it this far. I was actually kind of surprised he made it that far. But, in the end, it was a disappointing year. He only won the one race. He wasn't running great most of the year. But the way it started versus the way we are now, where we're at now, it kind of felt like an improvement. It kind of felt like he rose to expectations somewhat for a little bit. But in the grand scheme of the whole season, no. I mean, it was disappointing. It was definitely a step back from 2012 and 2013. I tried to be in denial about that, but it was hard to deny that because if you look at the whole year, his stats, he just wasn't as good. And the rest of the chase, he was terrible. 40th at Martinsville, 38th at Texas, 21st at Phoenix, 12th at Homestead to end the year. And he ends up finishing 15th in the points out of 16. So, yeah, just, his average finish that year was 17.6, no poles, 1 win. 3 top 5 finishes. The speed's just not there, and so I'm starting to get a little bit concerned. I'm waiting for the first 2 years of Hendrick to come back. And Kasey, again, there's no excuses. He's still young. He's in his 30s. There's no reason he should be running this poorly. The team's got to get it together, and I'm just, resetting for 2015, basically. That's really all you can do. Just hoping that the speed and the performance comes back. Well, we get to 2015, and it's an absolute disaster. An absolute disaster, guys. I don't know what's going on, but Kasey is just not relevant. He's not ever in the running for the win. I don't honestly remember much about 2015 for Kasey, to be honest with you. I remember that Pocono crash, the frightening one that he hit the pit road wall with. I remember that, and, that was like very early in the race, maybe the first lap, I don't know. I was like, okay, I'm done for the day. I was starting to get checked out on Kasey as far as his performance goes. I mean, I still love the guy, don't get me wrong, but I have no idea what happened. But his performance and the team's performance dropped off a cliff. Really, one thing you can point to here is Kenny Francis, who I haven't mentioned in this whole video, who I should have mentioned. He was very vital to Kasey's career. He was very involved in helping him out, communicating with him. He was the best crew chief Kasey had, and he was with him for a long time. And after 14, he left to take a higher position at Hendrick, and Keith Rodden was brought in. And I mean, I knew all this. I knew all this was happening, and I just had a bad feeling about that. I was like, Keith Rodden, I mean, I don't know much about him. I just don't know how this relationship is going to work. And sure enough, it did not work. It's amazing that it lasted as long as it did, but clearly that was not the match that was needed for this to work. And 2015 was an absolute disaster. He doesn't make the chase. He finishes 18th in points. And the first part of the year, he wasn't terrible. There were, some top 10, top 15 runs in there. But, that's not the goal. That's not the standard, the expectation for Kasey. And then the second half of the season, I mean, he fell off a cliff. So, a total throwaway season. And I wish I could say it was going to get better after that, but it didn't. 2016 was almost identical. Those 2 years to me run together. It's kind of like not quite as bad or worse than 09 and 10, or 10 and 11, I should say. 15 and 16 to me were a little worse than 10 and 11. But it was kind of that same feeling. I was just kind of checked out. You know, at this point, Kasey's getting older too, so that's a factor. But I'm pretty lost as to where Kasey's headed. You know, it kind of looks bleak. And so, you start seeing throughout the week or throughout the season, different sponsors, random sponsors appearing on Kasey's car that, no one's ever heard of, or they're kind of more obscure. That's not a good sign. That means Farmer's just backing off their commitment. His sponsors as a whole are backing off their commitment. Quaker State's not there anymore. A couple other sponsors aren't there anymore. Time Warner Cable, I think, they've left. And so, it's starting to feel like the writing is starting to get on the wall. This whole relationship with Kasey and Hendrick is starting to go stale, which is heartbreaking to me because this was obviously, I felt like this was Kasey's prime opportunity to be a championship threat, be a championship contender. And, for it to falter this quick was pretty disappointing, was pretty deflating, to be honest with you. But that's just the way it went. I mean, if you look at it, you've got Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Jr., and then there's Kasey Kahne. I know Kasey's he was a big name. He had a lot of fans, but he just doesn't stack up to those other three, not even close. Talent or, marketing-wise. I mean, there's no competition. So when I look back on his time at Hendrick, it was kind of him being the other guy, I mean, of course, he came in there with aspirations to win, and it looked like that was happening. 2012, 2013 were good years, were really good years. But like I was telling you guys, in 13, when he was starting to leave those wins on the table, that's why I felt so urgent and so frustrated when he wasn't winning, because I knew he had to show results to stick around at this place. That's the one kicker, that when you join an organization like Hendrick, you have to perform. And there's no just waiting around, being too patient. I mean, at some point, Kasey's shown the ability in the past. He's shown the potential, the talent in the past, and he just wasn't performing. So at the end of the day, again, Kenny Francis' departure was a big part to do with it, but that can't be, that excuse can't hold too much weight. I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to go out and compete. And, the top fives and then the top tens were getting more and more hard to come by. And it was just super deflating being a Kasey Kahne fan these 2 years, because I just knew each and every week that I just doubted he was going to compete. It was hard to get up and get excited for a race when you just had a good feeling that Kasey wasn't going to be around. He wasn't going to be in the picture. And so it was getting more and more obvious with each week that this thing was going in the wrong direction, but I just was kind of in a void, kind of in waiting mode, like what's going to happen here. I'm just waiting, waiting for something to happen. I don't know what it is. I'm just waiting for something to change, and it needs to change soon, because Kasey can't just be left wandering around in this stage of his career. He's got to have some kind of chance at resurgence. You've seen a lot of drivers have a resurgence late in their career or midway through their career. Martin Truex, for example. But that's what I was kind of waiting on. I was waiting on Kasey's next stand, but who knows when that was going to be. I was just kind of waiting around to see what happened. And then 17 comes, and I guess I should mention now, I mean, as everybody knows, Chase Elliott is coming to Hendrick, and that's, the next hotshot young phenom, and that's the last thing Kasey needs, because that's just somebody else putting pressure on him and somebody to compare and contrast him to. And so I like Chase. I mean, I still do to this day. I was, happy he joined Hendrick, and, I was on board. I was all in on him. But, yeah, at the same time, it was somewhat detrimental to Kasey's career. Kasey's now even further in the back seat at this whole operation. And so 17 starts, and, it's more the same. Nothing looking any more improved than it had been. It had gotten to the point where I was relying on the restrictor plate tracks for Kasey to win, because those are such wild cards, and he's still running well at those tracks. Through all this dysfunction, he's still running well at the restrictor plate tracks. So I'm thinking maybe he can steal one there, a 1 in a million shot. And he was, he finished 5th at Talladega in the spring. I was there at that. I remember it was a white knuckle finish. Ricky Stenhouse winning. Kasey was right there in the mix the whole time. He just couldn't find a way to win. But I was like just waiting on the next Daytona and Talladega race just to see if Kasey could somehow steal a win, And of course, it wasn't happening. Daytona, the July race that year, he was very competitive in that. He was leading laps. It looked like, one of those deals where he might finally win one here, You never know at those races. But he couldn't find a way to win that one. He kept getting shuffled back in the pack. That was obviously very frustrating to me. At this point, I'm kind of back to 2005 mode, all the way back there. Just get Kasey a win, or 2007 mode, I should say. Just get Kasey a win, get him a win to make him feel good about himself again, get the confidence, the team morale back up. But, no signs of that are showing it at all. Again, it's the same old story as the last 2 years. And, of course, the rumblings are now very public about his future at Hendrick. And that's making me anxious. And I knew, I'm not surprised one bit. I probably knew it was coming, but still, when you actually hear it at the same time, it's just not fun. And so I'm wondering what his future is going to be now at Hendrick. And, it's starting to become clear that I doubt it's going to continue, but deep down, I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful something happens, a miracle happens. There's more prospects waiting in the wings at Hendrick, or, in the pipeline for them to come up and eventually replace Kasey. But then we get to Indianapolis, and this is a track that Kasey's run fairly well in the past. It's kind of up and down for him. He ran second there in 05 to Tony. He nearly won there in 14. He had the best car. I forgot when I was recapping 2014 about that race. He possibly had the best car that day, but fuel mileage cost him the win. But yeah, Indianapolis was a pretty decent track for Kasey. He got around that place pretty well. But, of course, we're getting close to the chase again, and he's got to win, which I'm just, that's an afterthought at this point. I'm basically on life support as far as my hopes for Kasey to win a race at this point. And I just still didn't think he would ever win at Indy. I know he was good there a lot, but I still never thought he would actually win there. It felt too good to be true. And during this race, he's got a good car. He does. He's showing speed, but he can't get the track position. Indy is such a track position reliable track. You have to, be within the top 5 or 10 to have any chance of winning. Just the way the passing is there, it's not good, or it's not easy to pass there. And so I just felt like if he could just find a way to get track position, maybe he could go up there and make some noise. And they, I can't remember what call it was, but they made a call to get him out front on pit road, like a 2-tire stop. I can't remember what, but it turned out to work. Kasey was running up front well. He was leading with authority. And I was like, wow, okay, this is real. He really does have a car that could possibly win this race. I don't think it's going to happen. But, again, you just never know. You get a couple wild restarts, and who knows what could happen. And this is, I should bring up, NASCAR implemented this silly overtime line rule. I can't remember what year it was. It was around then. Probably was 17, where if on the green, white, checkered restart, if you crossed the overtime line on the track, it was at a different place at every track. With 2 to go, then the race is over at the next flag. So it basically shortened the green, white, checkered even more than just getting to the white flag. And they had a couple of those restarts. Kasey was kind of, the first one he didn't get the greatest jump, and then he got the jump ahead of Brad Keselowski. Got the jump on Brad, and they crossed the overtime line, and a wreck breaks out on the backstretch. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this really happening? Did Kasey win this race? I still wasn't sure. They showed the replay. I was, as anxious as I've ever been. Did they cross the overtime line? I didn't, the rule was dumb, but I didn't care. And they showed the replay. They did. Kasey was leading. The caution's out. The race is over. And my gosh, guys, I just, this was, of course, it was like Atlanta 14, that same feeling. This came out of nowhere, though. Absolutely nowhere. I told you guys the lead up to the Atlanta 14 win, where I kind of circled that race as a race that Kasey could possibly win at. He's historically good at Atlanta. That made sense. But this came out of nowhere. Kasey was dormant for 2.5 years, basically. And out of nowhere, with this, ill-fated relationship with Keith Rodden, ill-fated relationship with Hendrick, and he wins the Brickyard 400. Are you kidding me? I went absolutely ballistic, guys. I lost my mind. Same as Atlanta 14. Those same emotions, but like I said, different circumstances, different scenario. This was truly remarkable, and easily one of my top 5 wins of Kasey's career, because he kind of defied the odds here. These weren't the races that Kasey normally won, just like Atlanta 14. He wasn't dominant. Typically, if you go back and look, most of Kasey's wins, he was one of, if not the most dominant car of the race. It kind of had to all work out for him to win. He rarely, came from mid-pack or back of the pack to win. And, at a track where he'd never won, had modest success, was just completely off the radar for 2.5 years. Job security is not looking good, and he pulls this one out of a hat. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. And the fact that it was at Indy, I've never been that emotionally tied to Indy like some race fans are. I've just been a NASCAR fan growing up, so Indy didn't mean a whole lot to me. But I still knew it was big. I respected the stage it was. And for him to win there, man, just absolute joy and elation, all of that stuff. It was just truly, truly remarkable that he just rose from the ashes and accomplished this. No matter what happens, the rest of the way, this is something that I'll obviously remember forever. Kasey will remember forever, his family. And so it was just super thrilling to see this happen, and I was just so happy for him. That's really all I could think about, was just being so happy for him. He was exhausted in victory lane. He was, he was gasping for air. I was like begging somebody, get this man some help, get this man some water. I was like, where is the help here? Kasey needs some assistance. He was spent, because he knew that, a win was in sight and he may never get this chance again, and he capitalized on it and took everything he had in him to capitalize on it. He was completely used up. He had nothing left, and it turned into a win at Indianapolis. Who would have thought? And so now I'm thinking, could this possibly save his job at Hendrick? Could this be enough? Winning a race this big, could this get Rick's attention enough? He's out there on the bricks, kissing the bricks with Kasey and his team. I'm like, you know what? Maybe he's thinking, this old kid Kasey, he still got it. He's still got some left in the tank. And I'm hopeful. I'm like, maybe this could, be his second life, and maybe this could be the win that turns the corner for him. But it didn't. It was announced not too long later that Kasey would be leaving Hendrick Motorsports toward the end of the year. And I wasn't surprised, but I was still heartbroken somewhat. I was just disappointed. I wouldn't say heartbroken, but disappointed. It would be more heartbroken, I guess, if he was a little more successful, but he just simply wasn't doing enough. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that one win was all he had to hang his hat on for 3 years, and that's just not going to get it done at the end of the day. Again, sponsors were pulling back. He didn't have the same backing from farmers and his major sponsors as he did when he came in to Hendrick. But at the end of the day, he just didn't earn it. I was kind of in denial about him leaving for as long as I could drag it out. And at the end of the day, he just wasn't good enough. And I was kind of accepting of that in a way. Like, you know what? It just makes sense, I guess. I have to kind of remove my bias from this and understand that, Rick's got other prospects. He's got William Byron in the pipeline waiting. And it turns out that would be who would replace Kasey. And this was a funny feeling. No one had ever really replaced Kasey before in a bad way. So I'd never experienced that before. He had moved rides, but he had never been replaced essentially like that. Like, this driver is better than you. You're no longer relevant here. And so that was kind of hard to deal with a little bit, but I kind of got over it. I kind of just accepted the fact that his time at Hendrick it was time to end it. It had run its course. It was time to move on. And so now I'm kind of wondering where Kasey's going to go. He's a free agent now, so who's going to pick him up? I'm hopeful it's a competitive team. I'm thinking that. I'm expecting that. Kasey's still, I feel, has a lot left to offer. And so I'm kind of wondering, I'm kind of reading up on, who could possibly have an open spot for him, who would be interested in him. I was thinking maybe Tony Stewart at Stewart-Haas. They've always been close. They've had, parallel dirt track careers, crossed paths. And I just was anxious about where he was going next. I really didn't have much of an idea, but as long as it was a competitive ride, maybe he could rekindle his past success and find a way to, have that career resurgence like I was talking about. And I was very anxious about this. This meant a lot to me. And I was just curious about what the next move was and what all was going on. It seemed like every other day I was waiting to see the news, waiting to see if there was any reads on where Kasey was going. It was, a big deal to me. So I was just waiting to see what happened, really, and hoping it turned out to be good news. And then it comes out that it's going to be Leavine Family Racing, the 95 car. And this kind of was obviously not what I wanted to hear. I was pretty perplexed by this. And I got to say, when I heard it, I knew this was kind of the beginning of the end of Kasey's Cup career. In the back of my mind, it was way back in my mind. But that's just that little 10-year-old kid in me that latched onto him, his rookie season, still showing signs there when that news hit. I was like, well, I tried to make the most positive spin I could make on it, and it just all pointed to the same thing, that Kasey just, competitive top teams were no longer really interested in him. He was kind of getting up there in age. He wasn't consistently competitive anymore. Those last 2.5 years at Hendrick really kind of damaged his reputation. I wish, looking back, he would have left a lot earlier. Yes, he wouldn't have won that Brickyard race, I guess, but for the sake of his long-term career, I felt like he probably should have left Hendrick a lot sooner than he did. I guess just no one was there available to replace him yet, but yeah, I saw the whole car reveal, the paint scheme and everything, the 95 Procore car, and people were kind of getting on board with that and trying to, same thing as me, trying to make a positive spin on this. This could be good for Kasey, this could be what he needs to get back on his feet, but I knew, it wasn't going to end up like that. So just, a kind of a sad time to be a Kasey fan. Like I said, it was pretty clear that he only got this right because there was nowhere else to go. This was just the best available option. And so, yeah, it was upsetting. I had to just live with that for a little bit. Just, let that sink in, that reality sink in. That was always tough. I'm sure everybody that listens to this that has a retired favorite driver, they all went through this. Not all of some of them had happier endings than that, but yeah, at some point, your driver, if they're racing now, you're going to have to go through that reality that they're about to, their time is running out. And so, yeah, it wasn't easy, but it happened. And I had to come to terms with that. I had to understand that, Kasey's time may not be lasting much longer. Maybe something good could happen at Leavine, but, at this point, they're a back marker team. That's all they are. They're just kind of making their way in the Cup Series, trying to scrape up as many finishes as they can and money as they can. And, he was just there to kind of help move forward their goal to make it in the series. Turns out they ended up, going underwater a couple years ago. They're no longer around. But, yeah, just super sad times, guys. Super sad times there for a little bit from the end of 17 going into 18 with that announcement. And it was hard to come to terms with, but I got through it. And so I guess we might as well recap 18. And it went about what you would think it would. Kasey was not really around. He was just running as you would expect in a car like that. I remember the Daytona July race. He was leading a lot, like he was running up front. Looked like he might win the race. But I've seen this story before. At the end of the day, when you're with a team like that, you don't really have many friends out there. So I was just kind of hoping for a miracle, but he ended up not winning, of course. I don't remember what happened. He just got passed. But he finished fourth in that race. But that was the only thing I really remember about Kasey's 2018. And then, of course, you know, we get to the Southern 500, and he doesn't finish that race, and I find out why. He couldn't physically do it. And that was odd to hear. Kasey's in great shape. He's, you know, in very good shape. One of the best physically fit drivers out there. Why can't he finish a race all of a sudden? And it turns out, you know, he had this long history of, you know, heat exhaustion, I guess you could say. I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but, you know, this kind of blindsided me. Wait a second, now Kasey's not even going to be racing? You know, first I have to deal with the news that he's with a backmarker team, and now this. And, you know, we all know it would turn out to be the last time we saw Kasey in a cup race to this day. That could change in the future. I don't know. I kind of hope not. But, yeah, he was driving that 2006 throwback car, and that was the last time he was on the track. And that, you know, like I said, that blindsided me. But I was like, you know what? At this point, I just want Kasey to be happy. What's the use of him going out there in a ride like that every week, just not being competitive anymore? That can't be fun. So I just want what's best for Kasey at this point. I feel like, you know, his career's coming to an end anyway. He's won a lot of races. No, he hasn't had the career that we all wanted him to have, but when you look back on it, it was a pretty good career, better than a lot of guys can say. 18 career wins. Yeah, he never got that close to a championship, but he, you know, finished fourth that one year in 2012. That was pretty cool. He had the 2006 6-win season, his breakout season. But yeah, I mean, if you look back, I mean, that physical issue he had that kept him out of the end of 2018. If you go back in his rookie season at that Martinsville race where the piece of the track came up, it was a very, very hot day that day, and Kasey was struggling. As a rookie, he was 23, 24 years old in this race, and he was struggling. Like he would have think he was in his 50s. You know, he was needing oxygen, had a cool towel around his neck. So that right away showed that Kasey had sometimes intermittent struggles with conditioning, and it turned out to end his career. Who would have thought? But yeah, just I remember being blindsided by that news. But like I said, at this point, I mean, Kasey should just go run his sprint car teams. He's, you know, obviously for years now had his own sprint car teams. Be with his family. He's got a, you know, son now. You know, I want what's best for him. At the end of the day, I don't feel like he's got much left to give. I did at first, but now I'm like, okay, just, you know, go be free, Kasey. Go back out into where you belong. And I was perfectly at peace with that. You know, I was. Wasn't at first, and you know, when he was announced he was going to LFR, but that, you know, I was getting to the point where I was maturing a little bit more and understanding the bigger picture in life, and I just wanted him to be at peace with himself and not as miserable as he was in that ride. And so there was a good side to it for sure, silver lining for sure, and I wasn't that all torn up by it. You know, I was disappointed at first, but I moved on from that a lot quicker than I moved on from him racing at Levine. So yeah, just a weird way to end it, but it ended. That's how it did. So, well, that's the story of my journey as a diehard Kasey Kahne fan. I thought the best way to bring that to you was a raw, uncut, off-script version of it, and you guys could ride the ebbs and flows with me. There was a lot of heartbreak, a lot of disappointment, but that made the high points that much sweeter. If you were a fan of a superstar like Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson, you had a different perspective on racing. They were expected to win every week, and if they ran poorly, it was catastrophic. When Kasey won a race, it felt like a special occasion or a party with friends you never see much anymore. His career was enigmatic, and he didn't quite live up to the lofty expectations put on him from his exceptional rookie season, but he still can say he accomplished more than a lot of drivers that came through the series over the years. Kasey was recently added to the 75 greatest NASCAR drivers list, and I was shocked by this. He isn't a Hall of Famer, and he's rarely talked about in sentimental terms of the who's who of drivers, so when this was announced, I was stunned. But it was a pleasant surprise, just like that win at Indy at the end of his career. Today you can find Kasey racing full-time for his World of Outlaws sprint car team and making a cameo appearance in the SRX series. He's very active in the racing community and still has that passion to compete. Whatever the future holds for him, I hope it's successful and he's truly happy. He has 2 kids to live through now, and I think he really enjoys that. I'll always be proud to look back and say I supported him through thick and thin from his rookie season onward until the bitter end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and subscribe like your life depends on it. There's more content on the way. This has been a Platinum Paradise video.